Cracking the Cash Flow Code, and I'm about to massacre my guest name, which is Herb Cogliano. I think that close enough?
Josh, you did great. No, thank you and good morning. Great to be here.
Good morning. And Herb is the CEO of Aspire Growth Advisors. He's a certified scaling up advisor. He's actually gone through the certification program. He told me before we started he used scaling up in his own company, which was a staffing company, to go from 25 to if six is times 125 to 150 employees in a 30-month period, which is really fast. So, Herb, what allowed you to do that? Because I know most business owners, if you expected they would do that, they would just, they would react with horror.
Uh,
So, how did you do it?
yeah, I think it was a little bit of horror, but also some excitement. The business was just kind of going along and not getting the type of growth that we hoped. Had a wonderful group of people, a small team. They were smart and hardworking, but it just didn't seem to move. And we looked at these frameworks, and as a result of four types of good decisions we needed to make around our people, our strategy, our cash, and then our execution, we kind of got the decisions in the right steps aligned so that when put together correctly, our business started to take off. Our strategy was getting traction in the market. We were hiring the right type of people. They were accountable, delivering on the right type of work. And ultimately, we had the type of margins in the business that gave us enough cash flow to self-fund and sustain the growth that we were having.
That's very good. So what was the most challenging part of those four things? Which one was the most challenging for you?
Yeah, I think it happens in stages, Josh. In the beginning, it was strategy. We weren't getting traction, we weren't getting leads, we weren't getting the right type of customer. So we needed to get our strategy right first. And once we were getting our position in the market correctly, then leads and business came in. After we did that, my second problem arose, which was people. Did I have the right people? Were they doing the right jobs? And were they being successful and accountable to deliver on their work? We later were finding, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm
No, I think what was interesting about the journey, Josh, never having been there before, was that as we grew, the complexity and the challenges changed and evolved with the size and change in our business. From 25 people, one location, to 50 people, now with four locations, with three products lines, now with five product lines, with two customer types, now with four customer types. The complexity in the managing of it as we scaled brought bigger and different challenges. And that's why we needed to work on these four different areas all along the way.
So what was the biggest change you had to make during that journey personally, not the company?
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that to grow your company, it's really about growing yourself as a CEO and the people in the company to deal with it, to support the growth. So if your company is growing and doubling and you're not learning and developing on how to deal with it, you're going to hit a roadblock. We didn't know what it was like to do business in Canada. We only did business in New England. We had to figure out about currency, employment law. I knew none of those things when we began. But the ability to learn and grow with the business as a CEO and have a leadership team that's willing to do it too was really important in making our scaling up less drama filled and more fun and more profitable at the end of the day.
Yeah, that fits in with my favorite program I have. I call it More Cash, More Fun, because I think
Yeah,
that most business owners need a little bit of both.
yes. Have you ever heard the term the growth paradox?
Yes, but I'm not sure how you're referring to it.
Well, think of us. We start as entrepreneurs. We have a craft or a trade that we love. We decide we're going to make a living doing it. Next thing you know, we're enjoying it, but more people are coming and want to work with us. So now our business is growing, and I have to hire more people, buy more trucks, have more insurance, more building. And then what initially started as a love story between the owner and the business turns up into a nightmare. What you thought would grow into something even better, easier, more fun turns into something that's harder, more complex, and more drama filled the bigger you get. And
So, so I have a question for you, Herb. What was the most difficult skill you had to learn along the way?
boy, I think there was a lot of skills I had to learn along the way, but I think one of the most important skills is really understanding people. Because business at the end of the day is about managing the different psychologies, the different skills, the different mindsets of people that are in your business working with you day in and day out. I think the other thing deals with strategy. Where do I position the company to grow? Because even if you have a great business today, market dynamics and competition will change, and they will erode your margins, they will impact your pricing, and you can't stand still. You have to evolve as your business and as your markets evolve. And that's not an easy thing to do if you haven't done a lot of that before.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So in my world, the most difficult, or the world I tend to work in, the most difficult skill that the business owners I work with have to learn is how to become good at delegating.
Hmm.
Was that a challenge for you?
Well, it's one of the three major barriers to growth because if you think about it, when you begin, it's you and maybe, I don't know, 6 to 12 people. You know them all by name, you know their family, you know their kids. You can direct and delegate very effectively. But when you go to like 12 to 25 people and larger, and now you have to get the next level of leadership that can also delegate and predict and make good decisions, you're not that good at that because you never had to do it. And so a lot of people get into a gap that they only can grow as large as the amount of people they can personally manage and delegate to. And the smaller amount that is, the more limited your business is going to be. So it's not only your ability to delegate as a leader, it's the ability to identify the next level leadership team that can delegate with you further.
Yeah, well, learning how to just delegate effectively, period, is difficult. And then you get to what I call level two delegation, which is where you're managing managers.
Yes.
And that's a whole different skill set altogether because you have to learn how to be a teacher and how to be a delegator at the same time.
Yeah. Josh, one of the tools that I personally worked with, separate from scaling up, is around Ken Blanchard's work with situational leadership.
Love that stuff.
Yeah,
I thought that was his best work by far. And he and Paul Hersey's situational leadership. I mean, that was back like in the 70s or 80s, I think that came out.
but some of the best things in life are timeless. And I
Yes.
think when you can sit down with the CEO and clearly map out that, quadrant one, which is high directive, high support, and ultimately work with people until really you're delegating, which is low direction, low support. People are autonomous, they're independent. That's a great journey as a CEO to have with your direct team. And that's what I use with CEOs that are having a challenge with delegating. We work through that situational leadership roadmap.
Yeah, for those of us who are listening to this, Situational leadership may be a bit hard to find. I'll bet you can find some copies on Amazon. And I would highly, I mean, highly recommend that you read this book. I would say it's one of the top 20 business books of all times that I've read, and I've read a lot of them. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's a really, really good book. The other stuff Ken Blanchard did was nice, but more poppy. This was really good organizational development work. There's another author, a guy named Ishak Adizes, who talks about life cycles of corporations. Also really good stuff written, 40, 50 years ago. Some of that old organizational development stuff is still really good today. Warren Bennis wrote some great stuff, so there's a lot of it out there you might want to be taking a look at. Hey, Herb, I have a question for you. As you were growing, did you find that you outgrew the managers who got you to a certain point?
um, I would say there were periods where some people were not growing as quick as the business. I think that's fair and it can happen. I think what that said to me, Josh, I needed to be better at screening in leadership members that were open and excited about developing themselves. Number one, because that's not
So,
everybody that wants to do that. Number two, I needed to take more personal responsibility in directing and supporting their coaching and development activities as their boss. Almost like a co architect of working with them to develop their ideal career path and my ideal leadership development plan that would align with the needs of the company and the needs of them personally in their career.
so how did you handle the affordability thing? I mean, the managers that you used at 25 employees were likely
Yep.
paid much less than the managers you used at 100 employees
Yes.
because you needed a more sophisticated person there. And if you were going to hire somebody that could grow with the company, say you got 40 employees, you're hiring somebody in, you can't afford to pay them 150, $200,000, which is what you'll pay a senior manager when you have 125 people. So
Yeah.
how did you handle that issue?
Well, in scaling up around people decisions, we do a lot of work with Brad Smart's book, Top Grading.
Hmm.
And top grading is really about identifying the A players that you want to hire to be part of your team. And the definition of an A player, Josh, is the best person you can hire for that role with the budget you have and can afford. I
Yes.
can have A players at McDonald's making $12 an hour, Starbucks making 15, or somebody working at our company for 75,000 a year. So I think that was important for me because I was using it before as an excuse. Oh, we'll never get good people because we can't afford them. That was not a legitimate excuse. It was a concern, but I needed to screen in the people that shared our values, the people that got inspired by our purpose, what we were trying to do as an organization, personally connected with these people, whether it was about their family, community impact, or their career. We found a way to emotionally connect people to that purpose, and it made all the difference in the world.
So let's talk about values for a second because they're dear and near to my heart. And in my experience, any great privately held company is values led. And
Yeah.
you could even say that about public companies, although public companies do lip service and don't actually follow through on it nearly as much as private companies that pay attention to this stuff. So how did you realize that values were the one of the most important drivers for success in your business?
I think in scaling up, it really comes around people decisions. You'll hire smart people. You may even hire hardworking people, but it's how you behave with each other that makes an environment engaging and people desiring to stay. So what I learned was every one of us have values that we appreciate, that we enjoy, but what are the few shared values that we all have together here at this company? And whether we know it or not, the company has values, but we needed to uncover them and kind of discover what they actually were. They were unwritten values at the time, but once we clarified and uncovered the true values, and then we started hiring people that behaved and appreciated those shared values, the culture became better, stronger, less drama, better communication, better collaboration, and it just took off from there. And what I learned, Josh, three things I learned about the growth of our values in the company. Number one, to get the fire started, leadership had to personally use the values within our daily conversations with our team, either recognizing them or sometimes giving constructive feedback. Level two is when we heard the employees talk and reference them between each other. And best places to work, level three, is when we saw them referencing them with external stakeholders like our clients, our suppliers, our community stakeholders, and they were referencing them back and forth. That's when the culture was at its peak. And we were very proud of a team that really cared and shared their values with anybody we came and hold in touch with.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And what I've learned over the years is that the values have to flow from the owner. It's not a group activity creating values. It's your company. You need to own your values. You need to be the one developing the values. The people in your company need to come up and they have to adopt your values. You're not adopting their values.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, you find you get accidental values sneaking into your company, and you might feel like a stranger in your own company. And I've seen people, that happen to people over the years.
Hmm. Josh, you know what the toughest type of people to deal with in the company culture were? We would call them a diva because they were really good at producing, but they could not play well with other people in the sandbox, so to speak. And because they were a diva, you could never build anybody around them. So your team would always be deflated, but you'd be questioning yourself. They produce, they're bringing in so much revenue, so much activity, but at the end of the day, they normally do not help your company, and you have to ultimately find a place for them to be successful that won't damage the overall culture of your company. Those were the tough ones.
Yeah, we call them brilliant jerks.
Oh,
And the challenge with a brilliant jerk, and they sneak into companies on a semi-regular basis. And there are companies that to be successful, you have to be a brilliant jerk. Oracle is one of those companies that's filled with brilliant people who are just plain jerks. It's a Silicon Valley sort of thing.
yeah,
But you can, if you have them sneak into your company and you don't have a brilliant jerk, culture, they've got to leave. They cannot stay. They ruin your company. I mean, every time we had a brilliant jerk, and I finally realized I'm not going to rehabilitate this person. They must leave the company. When I did it, I would have a line out my door saying, "What took you so long?" And my response to my team at that point was, "Gee, there's something below your nose that probably could flap and make noise at me." So I wasn't very sympathetic to people when they could have brought it up to me, and they never did, ever.
yeah. We use something called the talent assessment tool
Yep.
in our senior team. Once a quarter, we look at all of our talent, and we look and measure people on the way they're living the values, 1 to 10, and the way that they're delivering on their role productivity or KPIs. And the goal of a great leader manager is to get as many of their people highly living those values, highly performing their role in productivity, and then ultimately coaching up all the other people that are in the other quadrants not succeeding and helping them get to the ideal quadrant of success, and either coach them up or on occasion have the courage to coach them out.
Yeah, well, in my experience, I used to coach people out a lot of times, which means I fired them. I
Yeah,
wasn't coaching people. I was just a brutal manager. I was not a good manager when I first started out. Well, what I learned is I ran across W. Edwards Demings in the early 80s, and one of his 14 points is don't blame the worker, blame the system, or blame the manager.
sure.
And once we finally started doing that, we would lose far less people because we built systems around people to help them be successful in their job. And, I used to think people wanted to figure it out. And the truth is, most people who work for us don't want to figure it out. They want to know what they need to do for excellence, and it's our job to provide that information and
Yeah.
training to folks. Was that your experience?
It is, Josh. I would just add to it. I really believe that we were co-architects, that you needed to want to develop or have some vision of a bigger future for you as an employee or leader. And I, as your manager, needed to be willing to support, guide, direct in helping you get there. But when I'm not willing or they're not willing, then you have an imbalance and you have a problem. And that's why some good employees leave companies, quite frankly, because they're growing quicker than the company's growing. And one of the things that got me into scaling up, if I had to be brutally honest, if you have a small company and the owners are doing well, nothing wrong with that. There's millions of lifestyle companies in the country. Actually, only 4% of the companies in the country ever make it over 1 million a year in revenue. So that's the majority of companies. But for those that want to get bigger, you have to be willing to create bigger futures, not only for you, but for all the people working on your team. And what I learned was if I wasn't prepared to grow, the people that had been with me 5, 10, 15 years were not going to stay with me another 5, 10, or 15 more if they were truly A players. Because A players wanted bigger opportunity, bigger future.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about that. So, Herb, unfortunately, we are out of time.
Ah,
And I love the stuff you're talking about because it fits in exactly. I've been doing this now for about 8 years, and what I find is people are good at what they do. We're all saying the same thing with a little bit different language. Best
sure.
practices are best practices are best practices, and you certainly are exhibiting that. So I'm going to bet that some of our listeners might want to contact you. How would they go about doing so?
Yep, you can contact me direct at my email, which is herb, Herb, at aspiregrowthadvisors.com, ASPIRE, growth, GROWTH, advisors, ADVISORS.com. Or you can check out my website, aspiregrowthadvisors.com as well.
Yeah, I would recommend you do that. I did before the show, and it's a good one. And I've got two things I'd like you to do. One I've said for about 8 years now, which is please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest rating and review. If you love us, say you love us. If you don't, well, cry, but you can say that too. And the second thing is, I've sort of a strange sense of humor every once in a while, but I developed this little piece I call the periodic table of business elements. And it's 39 strategic things that you can do in your business that will make your business personally and economically sustainable. You're not going to do all 39 at once. If you do, you'll be a total failure. So you get to choose one, maybe two, work on that, get it, and then say, what's the next one or two things I want to do? And if you want to make it into a little fun game, build a pyramid of what you want to do at the base and what's going to be at the top. It's easy to get. You just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co /periodic. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co joshpatrik.co/periodic. Just give me your first name and email, and we'll have it on its way to you. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Herb Cogliano. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.